at the beginning of the season, it seems only appropriate that we begin with cap space, a topic that I'm sure no fan is the least bit interested in. And yet it is an integral part of how you run a National Hockey League team. And as of today, there are, I think, John, 13 teams above the cap.
Yes, you're correct, Bob.
And
by the way,
have
nerdologists love it. Nerdologists love this stuff. So,
and you have teams that will have as few as 20 players, maybe 19 players, in order to get under the cap.
Well, the Maple Leafs are at 20 right now, and there's a few teams at 21. Yeah.
And the Leafs are what, $4 under the cap?
Yeah, after using all their LTIR, they have $4 they can spend.
American or Canadian?
No, I think that's American, Kevin. I think that's okay.
All right.
So.
All right.
Either way, I just don't understand. I don't understand how you get in this kind of trouble. Like Vegas is at the top of the food chain there. They've got like $96 million in signed contracts. That is $14 million plus over the cap at the start of the season. They played their first game last night.
Yeah.
Well, Vegas is just dumb, first of all. They've handled their affairs badly for the last 3 years or so. They keep trying to build an all-star team, and they don't seem to really care about the cap. They don't think it applies to them. Eventually it does, as we've seen. And the other thing is, I think a lot of teams got themselves in cap jail through really no fault of their own, expecting it to continue to rise like it would have until the pandemic hit. Now it's going to jump quite a bit here in the next 3 years and get some of these teams out of trouble, but a lot of these teams just put themselves up against the wall and can't get away from it. The Leafs certainly being one of them. I mean, I kind of laugh about all the cap talk in the league because, you know, the team I cover, the Buffalo Sabres, they have $18 million. They have oodles of cap space. They're just trying to stay above the floor because they know they're going to start paying here in the next 2 or 3 years, but they're just looking, going, all these teams are in trouble. We're in the best position of anybody right now.
Well, there are 4 or 5 teams that could actually take on significant contracts. Arizona, Detroit, Buffalo. Who else, Shannon? Anaheim.
Yeah.
Do you expect that to happen, Dupont?
Do I expect them to do what? I'm sorry.
Take on salary. I mean, these are teams that have room. You know, will they be
yes, some of those that you've named in there have room because they're just dog awful teams and they really don't have a lineup worth paying. That's part of it. Some of them are on the come. So there's that. Well, there are many fascinating aspects to this, but the devil being in the details here is those teams that are pegged up against the cap, like moths going to a floodlight. It's one thing if you're paying $6, $8, $10 million a year to prime players who are delivering for you, but when you start drilling down, you see some of these awful contracts. And, you know, we can get into debate and what's awful, but some of what we've seen here over the years with Boston is paying back us real money at $6 million and getting no performance out of it. And you can go up and down the lineups and or the roster lineup, if you will. And,
John Tavares.
And well, there you go. And the Toronto model, hand in hand. I'm glad you bring that up, Mike. Toronto model being, you know, overpay for a number of forwards at the top, and then you're choked in terms of filling out, getting a stud defenseman, a stud goaltender. So that to me has been Toronto's mistake for the last 3 to 4 years is over delivering or overpaying for those forwards and being stunted by it. So it's different for all of them. And another thought, which is tangential at best, I guess, is I look at 82.5, and then you look literally across the arena to the basketball teams that are playing in some of these places, and paying ordinary players, ordinary for me being guys I've never heard of, $18 and $20 million a year. It's just bizarro land, and all these sports and even the NFL, which prints money. Let's face it. It's the NFL in America is government. They just print it at will. Even their caps get messed up.
Do you remember a few years back, and it must have been a while back, because Darryl Sutter was the manager in Calgary, I believe. And they went to Edmonton and played a game. They had to play 2 players short. I think it was 2 players short. And the whole world was abuzz. The hockey world was, how could this happen? They've made a terrible mistake. It happened one game for the Calgary Flames. We might see this now all season long, where in order to stay under the cap, to be compliant, teams are going to elect not to play a full roster of 18-2 in order to make sure that they stay under. And it's going to happen more than once this year, I guarantee it. I suspect it could happen as early as tonight in a game, and we could see it all season long until somebody's forced to make a trade after some injuries.
You know, and what happens if you get injuries, and a
Right.
lot of them in a place like Toronto, in a place like Vancouver? You've got some real issues in some of these teams, and you're right, it's not good for the league, but ultimately these teams made their own bed and they have to sleep in it. And they simply created their own internal problems. And unfortunately, the way things are in the NHL right now, the general manager is as responsible for the cap as he is for making good trades. And I know they all have capologists working behind them, but he has to understand the ramifications of every deal he makes. And there are guys in those positions right now who often don't. And you wonder what they're doing, because it's clear they don't understand. They're only thinking about today. A lot of times I think some of these guys think, I'm just worried about today because I'm not going to be here in 2 or 3 years anyway if this doesn't work. So who cares if it screws up my cap?
I think there's a lot more of that in the league, Mike, than you even state. I really do. I think that there's managers saying, well, I only got 3 years left in my deal. I'm not going to worry about year 4. You know?
Right. Or year 5 or 6, if I sign a guy to some 6 or 7 year deal. I don't think there's any question that that goes on to a certain level, because there are guys in markets who know if I don't win, it doesn't matter. I'm going to get fired anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're talking about future situations. I mean, we now have 13 teams, like more than 1/3 of the league is over the cap now.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think some of them have done that. I mean, hasn't Kyle Dubas done that? Does he
Sure.
really care what the Leafs cap is going to be like 3 years from now? No. No.
Basically, well, Kyle doesn't have a contract after this year, Mike.
Right.
so-
Why does he care?
I guess.
And he's also in a market that, go back my NFL analogy, they print money. So they're really, the math is just sort of a
Right.
talking point for the Leafs. That wouldn't be the case for, let's pick a team here, Nashville.
But it's not a talking point if the Leafs have to play a game shorthanded.
No, that's right. Although I can make a talking point out of anything, of course, which is it might be a better sport dressing 11-5 every night. And
Oh, I think it probably is. Well,
And-
let me ask a question here that I don't really know the answer to. If you are over the cap and you have to sit somebody, can you sit anybody? Can you sit any player you want to?
Well, you still have to dress 2 goalies.
You have to
Okay.
dress 2 goalies.
But can you sit a guy who's making $10 million a year? Could you sit Matthews, Marner,
Sure. Just like
Sure.
it's just a healthy scratch.
Yeah, sure.
and
Why
that
not?
player then does not get paid that amount of money?
He still gets paid, but on the day-to-day basis,
Right.
you know, the cap is measured every day, Bob, every day.
I get it.
And so there's going to be times where they are going to be forced to usually send somebody to the American League or designate somebody off the roster. So it'll be very, very difficult to think it's going to be a Matthews or a Marner or anybody like that.